because she was bored, because she wanted to believe there was more to this world than this world would have you believe. From birth, she felt all of this coming. A treasured place he had worked since he was a young teenager. He loved the movies and felt it was a great piece of Americana that should not die, so it became his mission to take it over and carry on the tradition. He needed to keep his family rooted in this town, to this plot of land where all the secrets were buried. She was secretly fascinated by it, but just as much terrified at this point, now that most of her paranoia had come true. She thought it was the tiny percent of Indian she had in her that gave her this keen perception of shifts in the atmosphere. Odd things were happening to people and animals all over, but you had to pay attention to keep up because stories were buried and most fell under pseudoscience sites. These were not run as investigative reports, but humorous fluff pieces. Black bears were becoming domesticated pets seemingly overnight in parts of Jersey, allowed to play with children and sleep in their beds. Not just one, but dozens of them. They would just show up at their homes as if responding to a Nanny McPhee ad, while in other places, big cats were attacking hikers and joggers on a regular basis, hunting them like prey, as were sharks in the ocean as never before. So far, no one could explain. But there was definitely a drastic switch in behavior. Plants and trees were doing unbelievable things to survive too, and invasive varieties were popping up all over. At the same time, a new breed of healers and some charlatans were posting their newfound ability to communicate readily with plants and some animals. They shared insightful stories, some more outrageous. After a good chunk of people dropped off from bacterial infections in just 2 seasons, farmers finally moved to engineering food inside controlled environments. With the soil being left alone for only a few years, new fauna exploded and aggressively took over areas very quickly, especially with all the rainfall. You couldn't put your finger on it, but a huge shift was taking place. A chaotic order, Wendy thought. Somehow, this one was spared and had great reviews for its cleanliness and lack of crowds. The local hotels in this funny named town were also running great. Sorry. Somehow this one was spared and had great Somehow this one was spared and had great reviews for its cleanliness and lack of crowds. Oh my god. Somehow this sorry. The rich had recruited the age of shamans and used traditional medicine now only for surgeries and necessary cosmetic procedures. A large percentage of the left population had replaced vacations with spiritual retreats, including ayahuasca trips where you never left the tent. Celebrities had made the drug famous after Miley Cyrus and Cara Delevingne televised their entire honeymoon, allegedly held in another dimension far more superior to any place we have here on Earth. Most just saw them in bed for 5 days, but many said they were transported to sensational multi-dimensional realms. Miley even recorded an album of songs she said were written by the plant teachers, as she called them. Many artists felt these plant drugs were essential to reaching their best work and selves and refused to produce without them. The couple reached the town early. She was just trustful of the strangers, it seemed, and looked disappointed when they wanted to see food menus. Later, the cook busted out of the kitchen with 2 huge chilled bowls, personally bringing their salads with the most generous smile. He welcomed them as he said, "I hope you brought your appetites." For true. Hadn't he been at all impressed earlier that year when the story came out about those lions that conspired to break out of their sanctuary in a plot that clearly took planning and cooperation, especially since they brought the tigers with them and used the monkeys to help them get the keys? And how they didn't kill the guard, but knew just where to bite as to shock him instead? And how these same kids that were struck by lightning, who shot the video of the clouds coming down so low that they were actually in the weather system as it began to rain and thunder. She told Carl how she had noticed the sky was drastically changing, cloud formations of incredible shapes, plus storms were super low to the ground and moved in at high speeds. These stories were real, yet the masses were never convinced. Therefore, it was not newsworthy. Therefore, it was less than fake. It was not compelling enough. Carl became interested never. Occurrences were real and provable if he took the time to research, which very few did. Wendy did, every night, because she was bored, because she wanted to believe there was more to this world than this world would have you believe. From birth, she felt all of this coming, so it was an excitement for change, and she wanted to be there to help usher it in, whatever form it came. Everything was in jeopardy: weather, food supply, water, clean air, power, shelter, not to mention these were all the things needed for their blissful retirement. Any one event could bring the whole house of cards tumbling down. She just wanted to enjoy some happiness before everything went black. Back at the hotel, they rested a bit before heading to the movie. Something was up with this town they stumbled upon, and whatever it was, the business owners were weary of outsiders, Wendy thought. She didn't let her ruin her visit, but it was duly noted. Wade talked with the staff that night before dusk. They would stay open. Screw the radar. How many times has it been wrong before, he asked. Sally, who had worked there for 15 years, who actually trained Wade at the snack bar register, said, "Hey kid, I need to get home on the chance there really is a storm," as she has the longest commute down and across the Hudson River to Scoteville, and where she held her second job at PetSmart. Wade knew about the psychic. In fact, they were spiritually void, just looking for a nightly joyride to escape this new apocalypse of nothingness. And as a sober reminder, Wade found some had taken that ride straight to their grave when inspecting the woods at night. He would bury them quietly among the weeds like sacrifices to these new gods. He decided with the suicide rate what it was gentler on the families to think their kids had just left. So he never told the parents. He was a good man in a difficult and complicated time. nor could the bar owners report how small amounts of alcohol could send affected visitors into psychotic rages, sometimes having to be removed in a gurney. Too many for the government to keep. Whole small towns had dried up or were shut down. Fear drove weak decisions. Daily news briefings kept that panic alive. No, they couldn't take chances, they all agreed. They would need to stay on this crazy course for now. The townspeople had learned how to deal with their new perennial visitors to keep just enough in their digestive systems to remain at a state of light bliss with no hallucinations. This was a mixed blessing, as it kept their conscience at bay. They knew when to stay indoors if the wind churned up and not to take in too much. Maybe they were less susceptible, as they were part of an unknown symbiosis with these plants that were drawn to this place by some perfect storm of conditions. This hard-to-resist antidepressant that came like the morning dew. It only took a few to learn the hard way, as euphoria is a hard thing to quit. But ingesting too much could kill you, or worse, permanently displace you in another realm, expel you from this one entirely. But no one knew this is what happened, as no one ever came back to tell the tale. Chill temp in the air. In fact, the new plants were tall and thick-rooted, a sturdy stem that stood straight like sunflowers looking at you, and something else. They had a presence. They didn't feel ominous. More striking was how they seemed to have purpose, a consciousness. Out peacefully, Wade made sure to place him apart from all the others and always put fresh flowers on his grave. Probably the storm threat, he said. Thanks for coming out. We appreciate your business. Careful, lots of mosquitoes out tonight. He smiled at Wendy and walked off, stand as a standing guard. What needed protection, she wondered. Did I fall asleep? He asked Wendy. He didn't remember the movie or talking to her afterwards. He went to bed with no clothes on because everything felt itchy and foreign, he told his wife. He felt thousands of microbes had taken up shop on his body. He was about to ask Wendy if she felt funny too, but she suddenly felt so far away. No time had passed at all before he fell into a deep, silent sleep, more like a vast nothingness. Seconds later, he popped up as if out of the water, conscious, out of breath, but very lucid. What is happening? He thought. Gathering his bearings, he realized he was not able to breathe. In fact, he felt separate from his own body. He was on the inside of himself, completely disconnected. Nothing was responding as normal. His body felt like an abandoned house. How could this be possible? He thought. He tried to will his mouth open, but it was shut tight. How? He asked. Eerily, he realized how alone he was just then. But there was no time to understand what that meant. He needed to get help immediately. He went to move his arm to shake Wendy awake, but his limbs were no longer under his control. They were heavy as a fallen tree. He had lost all contact with his body. It had now been seconds too long. He desperately needed to get air flowing. Trying to even inch a finger across the sheets was futile. He could hear Wendy breathing, and for a moment remembered she had once read him a story on sleep paralysis. He pretended to listen, but it was no part of his reality. But now it was all sounding hauntingly familiar. He tried to scream out, "Help!" Ah! Nothing came out, but instead expended all of his energy. As he drifted deeper into the void, he recalled fever dreams as a boy, similar, of suffocating, drowning, being buried alive, but could never say where he was. Only black, opposite of somewhere, he would tell his mother. It was nowhere. This was that place. This was happening now at the Holiday Inn Express in Coxsackie, New York. He was going to die inside his own body, silently screaming and flailing. Panicking now, he made one last attempt to become super tiny and get inside his mouth to pry his lips open, but to no avail. Everything could make sense when nothing did, and this was felt natural. He tried to gather facts. He was processing thought. He considered, was this a delayed reaction to death? Like the chicken in the video Wendy showed me, still moving after being butchered? Inside, he could not reattach. I'm alive! His last muffled cries of terror not audible as he tried once more, an inner tug of his weighted down flesh. He never woke up. He would stay in this state for eternity, forever trapped inside this place that was nowhere. People told Wendy a week later at the funeral, just be glad he didn't suffer. She prayed it was true, but somehow could never believe it. She would live her remaining days in mourning before the heat finally took everyone 2 short years later. There are owls guiding him. Why owls, he thought. He had read the Algonquin Indians named Coxsackie, Makakakaking, the place of owls. There are owls guiding him. Why owls, he thought. He read the Algonquin Indians named Coxsackie, Makakakaking, the place of owls. They explain to him through their stare that he is in a place where he no longer needs to process thought through a filter. No more figuring or seeking. Here, all is known, always. Before he exploded into a billion particles of energy, he asked, where is here? The owls blinked, and in their eyes he saw that it was truth.